You're ready to go.
All right, well, today's Thursday, right? Happy Thursday. Good afternoon, everybody. 2 days post-election, so the world didn't end. And hopefully we're able to enjoy the change of pace and the weather outside. I'm Randy Gerber with Gerber, and this is Alec Broadfoot with Vision Spark. And we're here today to talk about helping you grow your business and leading with success. And Alec has in my experience, a very unique business that really helps companies identify leadership and identify how to work together as leaders and how to grow your business successfully and profitably. And so we're going to do a little bit of conversation and Q&A around this, and let Alec introduce yourself and talk more about your business, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So I run a company called Vision Spark. We're a small company, and our passion is help entrepreneurial companies with their people components. So we help them with hiring leaders. We help them with internal decisions in terms of, do we have the right people in the right seats? We help them create clarity around a position they need to hire for. And, sometimes there's these candidates that fall in their lap, and they just need some confidence around, should they hire that person or not? So that's what we're in business to do. We have clients in the UK, in Australia. The majority of them are in the US, and most are here in Ohio.
So Alec, is there a common mistake? So here's my first question. What size companies do you work with most often?
Size companies from an employee count are between 50 and 100 employees, roughly. We do have companies that are clients that are $1 billion, $2 billion in sales, but the majority of them are small, mid-sized, family-owned companies. Yeah.
So what's the most routine mistake they make around hiring their leadership team?
That's a great question. They either hire someone they know without taking time to truly identify what success looks like, what that position entails. Or the other common mistake would be to hire based on someone's credentials and their resume, and they're emotional about it. It's like, I do that with cars. I'm a car guy, and I lose all sorts of objectivity. I know other people do it with houses or some other things, and they don't make logical decisions, and they do that with a resume. Oh my gosh, this person has this credential, this credential, this credential. They are the person. And the resume, I say it's a marketing brochure. It's a two-dimensional document. It's 100% of them have exaggerations on them. Half of them have lies on them. And you can't make a critical decision that potentially can cost your company in the 6 digits, 7 digits on a piece of paper. Yeah.
That's why I don't have a resume. So it's impossible for me to
I don't either.
Yeah.
I don't either. Yeah.
And so okay, obviously resume is kind of a business card that everybody has to have. What should employers do then?
In terms of hiring for a leadership team?
Yeah.
Number one is they really need to take time and gain clarity around the position. So what does success look like? A year from now, I am super happy with this individual. What has he or she done? And then you could do the inverse of that. 3 months in the position, you're just not happy at all. This person's not doing well, and you're getting ready to fire them. Why are you thinking about that position? And so those two questions right there will give you clarity. And so it's important to identify what does success look like, and then think about the behaviors, traits, and values. So Jim Collins says first focus on the who, then the what. And so if you were to hire me as your controller and I start embezzling from you, in that case, you wouldn't have fired me for my resume. You would have fired me for who I am. Right. So we wanted to make sure we focus on hiring for that character and the person and the way they work with the team and their core values and the way they align with the hiring manager.
So I guess we have two questions. One of which is we're huge believers in having core values in your business, and not only having them, but rather livable, breathable core values that you can hire and fire your people to. So my first question is, how many folks that you talk to have legitimate core values you can hire and fire to?
Yes.
Not a trick question.
Not a trick question. Yeah, I would say about half of our clients
Okay.
truly live by their core values.
Okay.
We do tend to fire our clients, or we don't hire clients that don't align well with us. So about half truly have core values. About 80 to 90% say they have core values.
Got it.
Oftentimes they don't live and breathe them, and sometimes they're the wrong core values.
Got it. So let's talk about that universe of people, those companies that have really good core values that they live and breathe by. How do you test for that in the interview process? What do you do?
So going back to what you originally asked me about, the position profile is super important. So that you want to incorporate the core values in that, and that's going to attract individuals that want to work for your company. So seeing those core values is going to attract. And then it's also going to repel those that don't have those core values. You think about Seinfeld and George Costanza, and you think about his work ethic and his core values. And if your company is the opposite of that, you're not going to attract the George Costanzas to come work for your company. So that's super important. And then the next thing is to interview for core values. And it's a really simple interviewing technique. But you name the core value, and then you ask for a specific example around that. I could share how to do that.
Sure.
Yeah. So for example, let's say for instance, one of your core values is unique problem solving ability. You want problem solvers, you want critical thinkers, strategic thinkers. So the first thing you do is you say, Randy, are you a problem solver? Or would you describe yourself as a problem solver? Or on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, how would you rate your problem solving ability? So you're asking a closed-end question, and that allows the interview candidate to understand, okay, now Alex can ask me about my problem solving ability. So it gives them the opportunity to transition in their mind. And then the next thing you're going to ask is you're going to start the phrase with, tell me about a time when. So Randy, tell me about a time when you encountered a really difficult problem. You saw your revenue dropping, COVID hit your company, you realized your industry was going to soon suffer, and you came up with a solution that helped your company succeed, right? And then you're looking for a specific example.
So I would suspect that those companies who don't have true core values, or they're not accurate, this type of technique is probably a disaster. It's also almost going to assure you hire the wrong people over and over again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Turnover.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Got it. Huh. What other things should, I'm the owner of a business and I'm trying to grow. What other thoughts should I have around my leadership team and trying to get them to hire them and perform at the levels that they should be?
Mm-hmm. Number one, they need to know how you're going to hold them accountable. What does good success look like? What does good performance look like? And oftentimes entrepreneurs, leaders say, well, I shouldn't have to communicate that to my team members. They'll often say, at this level, they should already know that. My VP of sales, I shouldn't have to communicate what success looks like at this level. So that's number one. Number two is, are they the right people to lead your team to the next level? And I think that's a critical question.
Let's go back to number one for a second. So walk me through that. I mean, do you agree with that position that they shouldn't have to tell them, or that they have to tell them, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
And how do you do that? What's in your professional experience, what's the best way to do that?
So if I'm hiring you and it's, a 6-figure position, what's return on investment look like? What pain am I currently facing that you can solve? So if you're a VP of sales and I'm paying you $150,000 a year base plus commission, I need to return on that investment. And if you're not in that role, what kind of headaches will I have? And you start thinking about, hey, this is what they need to do, right? So we want to grow our business by 20%. So that is a metric, right? And you start thinking about things like that. Coach and mentor employees, make sure the employees have what they need. The salespeople have what they need to reach their goals. So you start spelling those things out.
Got it. And you were on to the second thing you were mentioning that they should be doing.
Yeah, so the second thing I mentioned was when we talk to entrepreneurial companies, they're growing and they are achieving some success. Oftentimes there's a bottleneck and they're frustrated in their team. And one of the clarifying questions that they can ask themselves is this the person that can take my company to the next level? So individuals are there, maybe they take the company from 1 million in sales to 15 million in sales, but they're not the same person that can take them from 15 million to 100 million.
And how often do you see people realize that proactively?
I don't think they do it until they don't until they get there. There's this frustration, right? We're not hitting our goals, we're not cranking it.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's hard for entrepreneurs, in my experience, when somebody gets you from point A to point B to turn them over at that point. They haven't done anything wrong necessarily, but they're not the right person to go to the next level.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs and visionaries, what makes them great at what they do also makes them not great at people decisions.
Talk about that. I mean, I understand why you're saying that, but I mean, is there a way for them to be more aware? Was there a way for entrepreneurs to be more aware that that's a blind spot for them or a weakness?
I mean, I think just knowing, that, in the personality aspect is that they're more sensitive in nature. So their sensitivity, their empathy allows them to create products and services. So they know the needs of the market. There's a void here. Let's do this. Right? So that component of what helps them succeed with their services is that they also are very loyal to the people that work for them.
Yeah.
And they have compassion and like, man, what am I gonna, I have Joanne on my team and she's been with us for 6 years and she's not succeeding. So what do I do with Joanne? And you create a position for them and that's often an indication that it's not succeeding. Yeah.
I know from our perspective, one of the things that we see with entrepreneurs is that they grow their business for growth's sake. They don't grow with purpose. And one of the things that we help them understand is okay, if you're a $5 million business and you're dropping 10% of the bottom line, in order for you to achieve your life goals, you have to be a $25 million business dropping 11, 12% of the bottom line. And so in my experience, entrepreneurs in general don't understand that, that they can accomplish their life goals if they understand where they're going. And if you understand where you're going, it seems to me the people issues get a lot easier to address. I mean, people issues are always going to be difficult because they're people, right? And to your point, entrepreneurs, particularly first generation entrepreneurs, they care about people, So saying, hey, thanks for getting me from 5 to 15, but you're not going to be 15 to 25 is tough.
It is tough.
Yeah.
It is tough.
Do you see people repurpose? Do you see entrepreneurs repurpose that person in a different role in the company, or do they end up leaving the company, or really, what's the best choice in general, or is there such a thing?
I think it's super important to understand the individual's strengths and weaknesses, and to really understand who they are. And I think that is a key component where someone doesn't really know their true strengths. For example, we see when we do a COO role, we will get hundreds of resumes and we'll have individuals that make it to the end, and about 75% of them don't have the basic ingredients to manage other people. Yet their whole career, they've been in some sort of management role. They've been elevating their career, escalating, going through career progression, and they don't even know themselves. And yet they see the path is I gotta be a better manager, and they're working on their weaknesses. And so if you think about entrepreneurs, they have people on their team and they don't know the true strengths and weaknesses. So that's why it's super important to evaluate your team members fairly regularly.
Talk about evaluation. I know you know a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, there's different assessment tools. Right. There's DISCs and Myers-Briggs and Strength Finders.
What's your opinion the best?
The best for right people, right seats is something that we use at Vision Spark called the Achiever. And why we like the Achiever, and at Vision Spark, we have the option of using any assessment tool.
Right.
But our reputation is based on that. Right?
Sure. Right.
And so we like the Achiever because it evaluates not just personality, but someone's mental aptitude, which is their mental acuity, their attention and detail, ability to work with numbers, their communication ability, and that's super important. And it measures personality. So if you're going to use an assessment tool, definitely use one that measures mental aptitudes.
So we did Achiever through you, and what I liked about it specifically was it not only measured the mental acuity, but relative to the role. And so for me, when I saw the results of our leadership team here, it really solidified right person, right seat, right? So, I mean, I think, and for a lot of folks, and Jim Collins says this, and a lot of EOS people say this as well too, that you want to get the right person first, right? And then you'll find the right seat for them. And that's true. I think that in growing organizations where there's a lot of maybe murkiness sometimes, when you're growing at a pretty fast rate and you need more people or different people, that right seat can be really hard to identify. And it's one of the things even here for us, we had our annual retreat in September, and we know we have to reset our seats. And it was really hard to go through and say, we've gone from point A to point B, now we're trying to go to the next level, and we know we need new seats, but it was hard to define those, and then, you juggle the right people into that, it's tough.
Yeah, it's very tough.
So the Achiever is interesting because it's, in order for that, and again, tests are, in my opinion, whatever the input is, the quality of the input that drives the quality of the output, right? So that piece of it is understanding that right seat. But yeah, I thought the Achiever test was terrific, and it was very illuminating. And in my opinion, I'm not sure there's one test that defines everything for everybody, but that's a really good one.
The assessment tests they're amazing.
Yeah.
And they each will share something about that person. So right people, right seats, we love the Achiever. Colby's a great one to really find someone's drive and instinct, and it's not can they do it, but will they do it? Predictive index and culture index, those are good assessments too. So there are some good assessments out there.
I was in a debate discussion with somebody last night on this very topic. When does historical performance trump tests, or does it?
That's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll share a story real quickly. I had a mailing and printing company, and we ran 2 shifts, and I had this general manager that was in charge of both shifts, and she was amazing. She had the shift running like clockwork. The output was great, and she had 30 years experience in the industry. And when I had her do the Achiever, I was shocked that her mental aptitudes, her mental acuity was very much on the low side. And I'm like, how is she so successful? Well, here she based all her success on her experience. And so whenever she faced a situation, she would say, okay, what have I done in the past to make that successful? So that's where she was strong. Where she was not strong, when I'd say, hey, can you come up with an incentive system for employees to reach their goals?
Something she'd not done before.
Right. And that's where that came in. So, I think in the day and age we're in, we need individuals on our team that are strategic thinkers, critical thinkers that can, pivot, that can help the company move direction with the challenging times we're in.
But you still have to have doers and thinkers. You can't have a whole population of thinkers.
Yes,
right.
That would be frustrating.
Yeah, nothing to get done.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you can't have a whole population of doers either, because nothing's going to get done.
And the worst is to have a lot of thinkers that are completely disorganized and don't follow process, right? And then it's other chaos and lots of false starts. And
That never happens. So let's talk about rate of growth for a little bit. That to me, and I think COVID really accelerated this, but the rate of business seems to go faster and faster. And the Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach, when COVID hit back in April, put out a communication to everybody that basically he predicted that COVID will accelerate innovation by 5 years and 3 months.
Mhm.
That, that companies are gonna have to innovate in, what would ordinarily have been 5 years and 3 months. And I read that, and I'm not a strategic coach, and that's not I probably should be. But anyway, I thought that's a pretty bold statement to put out there. However, I think he was spot on, that it really did force companies to be innovative. And so when you think about rate of change, you think about, and we changed quite a bit in a short period of time. How often should we do these tests? I mean, because it's like even Achiever, if it's a right seat thing, this is changing, how often should we do them?
I would do the Achiever within an organization once every 2 years, but I would look at it every quarter, every 6 months. And what's great about it is you may have someone on your team and you don't know that their strengths, you may have forgotten about it. And you're thinking, man, can I take advantage of this strength?
I see.
Yeah,
That
and
makes
your
sense.
productivity actually goes up.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, because people probably have a strength that may not be quite as important
Mhm.
at one stage in the company becomes more important at a different stage.
Yeah, or maybe you lose an employee. Maybe,
Oh, yeah.
maybe you lose your bookkeeper and you realize, Joe on the team has a really high numerical perception. Has an interest in accounting. Could we take advantage of that and send him to training? And he already knows our business. Can we have him be our bookkeeper?
Right.
He's already bought in. He has core values. So
Right.
that's an example of how it can work well.
Talk to me about hiring process.
Mhm.
In your experience, and not so much with your customers, obviously your customers are enlightened because they are your customers, but how many companies have a long or even dangerous hiring process?
I think most companies don't even have a hiring process.
Which is the dangerous part.
Yeah,
That's
yes,
the one that,
yeah,
in
yeah.
my mind, we don't have one that's probably pretty
Mhm.
dangerous, right?
Yeah.
Is a bad hiring process better than no hiring process?
Yes.
Okay,
Absolutely.
that's pretty quick, yes. Why is that?
Well, at your company, you probably have a process
We do.
for new leads.
Yep.
New customers. You
Yep.
probably have a process for follow up with your customers. You have processes all across the board.
Right.
And most companies I see have good processes when it comes to that. But when it comes to hiring, it's very haphazard and random. Visionaries, entrepreneurs are the worst. And I'm pointing to myself because we're like, man, I like this person. Let's bring them in.
Right.
And the companies that do well are disciplined at having a hiring process. Yeah.
I know when we do a hiring process, and it's pretty rigorous, and if Jocelyn, if you're listening, thank you for adhering to it, because I know I would have left to my own devices, but we have definitely hired much more effectively because of that process.
Mhm.
This made a big difference.
Yes.
Is there a silver bullet or golden rule or best practice run hiring process besides just have one?
Have the hiring process, create a compelling position profile, number one, and I included a hiring with confidence checklist, so I think everyone on here got that. But have a position profile, evaluate them objectively, use tools.
Stop.
Yeah.
What does objectively mean?
Well, you don't want to base a decision on gut. So your gut's important when you're wanting to disqualify them. But when you're trying to qualify them, you don't want to base it on gut.
Got it.
So having a set of interview questions on your core values, interrogating your resume, an assessment tool, those are all things to help make objective decisions.
So I just want one little, how often is your gut wrong on disqualifying people or even firing people? Because it's kind of the same thing in many respects. How, in your experience with the, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people you've talked to, how often is your gut wrong around that topic?
Not very often.
Not very often.
No, if you're thinking, man, there's something not right here.
Yeah.
It's probably right.
Yeah.
However, if you flip it, I really want to hire this person, I'm based on gut. That's usually
usually
wrong.
Yeah.
It's about 80% failure rate.
Got it. Interesting. And not that I want to spend a lot of time on a negative topic, but when your gut tells you that somebody should go, should you wait?
No. which
Which
is so hard
Right.
for most leaders, right?
Yeah.
They're losing sleep and they don't want to have that difficult conversation. Yeah, it's very hard.
Got it.
Yeah.
So what other people matters do you think are important for growing a company successfully that we haven't covered so far?
Right people, right seats, hiring for core values, making sure the managers are managing their employees well, I think is key. Holding them accountable. If there's turnover, is it an employee issue or is it a manager issue? Oftentimes, organizations will have one manager with higher turnovers. Managers and leaders, that's their job, is to get their coach and mentor their team to get the work done and to succeed and to be engaged. And that's super important.
Yeah. So a person who is a manager, I think I'm going to answer my own question here, but a person who's a manager and they have turnover on their team, they might be the right person in the wrong seat, right? And so it's just getting them in the right seat. Or is that person just doomed as a manager? Probably.
They may not be a good manager.
So it's just, so you either are or you're not a good manager, no matter where you are in the organization.
I think what I've seen is people are trainable. They can be trained to be a good manager if they have the ingredients.
Which are?
So good, strong in organization, process. They have to have a degree in process. They have to have a balance of being sensitive as well as thick-skinned. So they have to, a sensitive manager where, you have someone who's constantly calling in sick, they're not hitting their numbers. Someone will be like, that's all right, no worries. And that, that's not a good balance. Or versus someone else who's super direct and thick-skinned, they're gonna have turn. So they have to have a good balance there. They have to be team-oriented, but yet be able to make effective decisions and good decision-making. So there's a lot of good managers will have a balance of traits, but organization and orientation towards process are key.
In communication?
Communication, yes, that's important. Yes. So
is that most important?
No, it's up there though.
Okay.
Yeah, it's up there. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would you say is most important for that manager?
To care about people and to care about their team success.
Yeah.
That they're willing to do what it takes for the team to succeed.
I think COVID is very interesting, and how it really exacerbated the care about people part. And what's interesting is that word care meant different things to different people. So some people was a physical safety thing. Some people was, I don't want to lose my job. Some people was, I don't want to take a pay cut. Some people was all the above. It was interesting, but I in talking to Kit Foreman, who's an HR specialist, her position is that the well-being of the employee is going to be the strategic cornerstone going forward for businesses. That if you aren't, if as a part of your growth plan, part of your growth strategy is not how to invest in the well-being of the people on your team, you're going to miss the boat. And I tend to agree with, I don't tend to, I do agree with that. I think that COVID really illuminated that for a lot of folks, that caring, and that was hard because as entrepreneurs, your definition of care might be, one thing, but others is something different.
Yeah. Even
though you do care.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
And I think I agree with that as well. And loyalty is twofold. So if you're loyalty to your team members and you care and you're willing to accommodate their needs, they'll be loyal back. And so I think it's twofold.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Annie, do we have any questions?
Not yet.
Do you want to ask one? Alec, anything else that you want to?
Do you want to talk compensation? I know you asked me about compensation.
Let's talk about compensation. Yeah, that's a big one. So I guess I'll kick it off with this, that in our experience, so our lens when we are meeting with our clients and particularly our prospective clients, that we learn that their compensation system that they deploy for their leadership team is very arbitrary. It's either based on what it took to bring the person over to the company, or just history, or what's considered to be acceptable in the industry. And in my experience, that it really should be aligned with where you're trying to go, where, and that's where part of most entrepreneurs don't put enough time and effort trying to understand what does the future look like? What does it want to look like for the company, And so many people grow for growth's sake, and that's just not the right choice. I'm going to say this, and I'm kind of curious if you agree or disagree. In my experience, and a little bit in research from particularly around Jim Collins, that I think you want to have all A players on your team, and A players pretty much demand to be paid at A player rates, and that means that they're paid at the 100th percentile or something like that. So they're not walking across the street for $5,000 or $10,000. I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's very true. And, Steve Jobs said a small group of A+ players can run circles around large groups of B and C players.
Right.
So if you think about it, if entrepreneurs say, okay, how much more productive is this person, this A player on my team versus a B player, you'll get answers 50% more productive, 2 times more productive, 10 times more productive. Now equate that to compensation. Are you willing to pay them a little bit more to get, are you willing to pay them 20% more to get 50% productivity?
How often do you see people, people making those decisions people who make those decisions are enlightened to that thinking?
I think they agree with it in their head, but then when it comes to making an offer, they will often shortchange.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience, I can think of a few organizations that really are paying people above and beyond, and they're superstars in their industries. I mean, in their segment, they do a great job. Do you have evidence of that in your own experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So if you have a great culture and you can pay your employees well, sky's the limit.
Now, I've often heard the reason why somebody works for a company is that number one, submission the company's on. Number two, it's the quality of the people they work with. Number three is respect they get from the organization. The fourth is compensation. What's your?
It is that order. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so that, as a shareholder of the company, I know when I looked at the list of folks on this webinar that the vast majority own businesses, that it's really your duty to define the mission you're on. And it's your duty culturally to make sure that you have A players, you're working with. And what's interesting in my experience is A players want to work with A players. C players would like to work with C players too, because they don't want to get exposed by the A players, right? And so they're not going to complain about having a bunch of mediocrity around them, right? And then the third thing is a respect issue, and I think that's cultural as well too, and part of the hiring process and part of job description and everything that goes with it.
Absolutely, 100% sure.
So, what else on compensation do you think?
Well, if they do have an opening and they do want to hire an A player and they're getting ready to talk about compensation, instead of going online and seeing what the average is, what would it take to get an A player? If your budget is 120,000, is that budget for a B player, or is that a budget for an A player? Oh, I would pay more for an A player. Well, why don't you post it more? I would pay 140 for an A player. Well, why not advertise it as 140?
Yeah, advertise 140 and be patient to find it. Don't hire somebody at 140 what do you do if you can't find an A player? Do you pass on hiring, or what do you do?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I think you pass on hiring, but I also think where I see a lot of problems is the qualifications are much higher. So if to exaggerate, let's say you're looking for a VP of sales and they have to have 20 years in your industry, they have to have an MBA, they have to be bilingual, they have to live in Columbus, Ohio, and you start listing all these requirements, and then your compensation is not able to attract it, you're gonna have a really hard time. So you gotta be willing, time's gotta be on your side. It's gonna take a long time to find that person. So you can adjust it by saying, you know what, I really don't need 20 years in the industry. I need maybe 2 years in the industry, but I need 15 years of leadership experience.
Got it.
Yeah.
Or if the return on investment allows for it, we adjust the compensation. I mean,
Yeah,
if the market's saying there's nobody out there, then maybe you're, 140 is not the right number, maybe it needs to be 180 or 200 or something.
Yeah.
So
That's very true. At Vision Spark, we call them purple squirrels. And, the client's looking for a purple squirrel and they're not willing to pay a purple squirrel salary. It's not going to happen.
got it.
Yeah.
Got it. And is there any evidence that the idea of changing the requirements, making them less strict, is that a bad thing or?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a myth that if I get someone with industry experience, they're going to hit the ground running. We hear that all the time. And that's most cases, I call them short-term splashes because they have that industry experience, but they peter out. And no matter who you hire, you're going to have some adjustment time. If you hire someone with industry experience, or if you hire someone with limited or zero, there's going to be an adjustment period. So if you hire someone without industry experience, but they have really strong mental aptitudes, they're strategic thinkers, they fit with your core values, they will be more successful, not just in the long term, but in the intermediate term.
So a little bit depends on the industry, I would imagine, because I know in our experience, last year or 15, 16 months ago, we hired 2 people, one with substantial experience, one with limited, and one did hit the ground running, and is still further ahead.
Yeah.
Because there's a technical aspect to what we do that's important.
And I would venture to say that this individual probably has strong mental aptitudes and has your core values.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, compensation is tricky and often emotional, I think, too. And I think that too often, my words right here, entrepreneurs look at compensation as an expense versus an investment. And I think entrepreneurs don't have good tools or don't choose to use tools to measure return on investment. Around compensation. What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. If you're thinking about purchasing a stock, I'll use Apple as an example, but you may research it. You may be happy with a 15% annual return. And so, if you say, okay, I'm going to buy $100,000 of an Apple stock and, I'll be happy if I double my money in 3 or 4 years. You have to come up with $100,000 for that, right? But when you hire someone, it's an investment and it's not 100,000. It's okay. What can I, it's maybe $30,000 in the first 90 days. What kind of return can I get out of $30,000 investing in my business in a person? I guarantee you it'll be more than that Apple stock.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I know going into COVID, one of the challenges with compensation was that, and particularly in Central Ohio, that when you have an unemployment rate at 4.00%, which is where we were, compensation goes crazy. And, I was curious what was going to happen with comp that through this whole disruption in the employment market. And candidly, if you're in an industry where there wasn't any disruption, it really hasn't changed. In fact, it might have gotten worse because those businesses that weren't disrupted are doing pretty well in general.
Yes, they're doing well. And even some of the other industries, I'm not talking about the ones that have been hurt hard, but they're still doing what they can to keep their A players, their superstars,
That's
paying
right.
them.
That's right.
So those compensations aren't adjusted.
Right.
And sometimes you can get someone on sale that's out of the market, but we're finding most employers are doing what they can to retain their superstars.
And I agree with that. Now, I will say, having said all that, I've experienced it both ways here myself, and I'm seeing with our clients. But the labor pool is improved a lot. There are people out there you can hire.
Yeah.
And there's people who changed, whether they're changing because they want to move to Denver or they want to they just want to change the scenery. Big company, small company, whatever it may be. And because 2020 is a year change. But so the labor pool is much bigger and more robust than it was. But I don't think the compensation has changed. I think people still have pretty high expectations on that.
They do.
Yeah. Be curious what happens with the hospitality and the hotel and the restaurant business around compensation, because those industries have gotten in travel, have gotten hit so hard and probably for so long. There's going to be some adjustments.
Yeah,
I would think.
Yeah, definitely that industry. Yeah, especially for business travelers and,
Who knows what happens there, right?
Yeah.
So, Andy, have we lulled anyone into a question?
I actually do have a few questions.
Okay,
So my first question from Rick is, we are working on integrating our core values into our performance review process. What advice do you have?
core values in the performance review process.
yeah, so why don't you repeat the question so it's
Yeah.
super clear?
We are working on integrating our core values into our performance review process. What advice do you have?
I would first say, are they aware of the core values? So you don't want to surprise them, and you need to be descriptive of what those core values are. So what are the behaviors of those core values? So if your core value is first-class customer service, what are some of the behaviors of that? So it's important to give them the opportunity. If an individual is not performing well in an area of core value, to have 2 or 3 specific examples of that in that conversation. Don't base it on gut or something you thought about. Have some specifics.
It's funny on the core value, make sure they're aware. So back in 2004 or 5, we had hired a consultant. I don't remember her name anymore, but we hired her. Her business was around construction of core values. And so she came in and talked to her, and she asked, do you have core values? And of course we have core values. And so she said, well, what are they? So I go find my notebook and I go look them up and I rattle them off to her. And she goes, oh, they all sound good, whatever. She was very professional and didn't make me feel badly too quickly. She goes, well, do you mind if I ask all your team members? And I'm like, sure, go ahead. And so she asked everybody, and it was the same answer from everybody that, well, yeah, we have core values, but we don't know what they are. And so, and had we tried to interview or review people to that, would have been a disaster, because like, what are you talking about? So, but
I see that a lot.
Yeah.
I was doing some consulting for a client in Florida, and they had 12 core values, which are way too many.
Yeah.
And they had them, pictures all over the place of the core values. And they were the standard core values: integrity, teamwork, and no one knew what they are.
Right.
It just was words.
I think integrity is one of the worst core values, because so you're saying you would hire somebody who doesn't have integrity? if you're measuring you're willing to hire them without integrity.
Yeah.
So I know for us, we have 4 core values, and we live and breathe them. It is something that we talk about, the reference, I should say, if not daily, weekly for sure. And so it's easy for us in our reviews, which we do a review, and it's easy for us in those reviews to compare to the core values, because they're so frequently discussed. And that's, at this stage, really all we have to do in our peer reviews is say, how does this person do on their values?
Yeah.
So Andy, I know you're a person that can only see the top of your head since you're sitting there. Do we have other questions?
I do have another question. It's a 2-part question. Tyler asks, what are your opinions on using recruitment services to aid in finding new people? And if not using recruiters, what online resources do you prefer to attract the right talent?
Yes, so recruiters, they're a good resource. As entrepreneurs, we want to think about how can we be most efficient with our time. So recruiters are good. There's good recruiters. There's not so good recruiters. Oftentimes they're more transaction oriented. They're just wanting to make that sale. And at Vision Spark, we call that approach the push approach, where they're trying to push a candidate on you. They're trying to push the candidate, you on the candidate. And so, number one, there's a hiring with confidence checklist. So take time to really put together a position profile and what success looks like, and make that really clear. And then you can assign the recruiters what that looks like. And then before you hire them, use a third-party service to evaluate that candidate. Someone else that can ask that particular candidate some questions, use an assessment tool. So we're often pulled in to that where we help that candidate. So we had a client who used a recruiter for a controller. They narrowed it down to 3. Our client was super happy, and we told them not to hire any of them. And they were all, their attention to detail score was horrible. And we said, do not hire any of them. Did they listen? No, they didn't listen. And 6 months later, our client called us back and said, hey, we should have listened to you. It was a $500,000 mistake. So I share that just so you know, it's to have somebody else help vet with the final candidates that the recruiter gives you.
You know, and Tyler, I'll answer that question with a little more context. That what we tell our clients is, and this is conditional, what Alex said earlier, that you have a hiring process and you stick to it. And so we really encourage our clients to hit their natural network first, looking for candidates, you know, whether it be via LinkedIn or, I mean, I think you leverage your social media natural net for people, put it out there, because I still think a referral matters, you know, and so, but then stick to your guns on your whole hiring process along the way. And we just hired a gem, well, maybe I'll tell you in 2 years, but I think a gem of a person that came from a direct referral for somebody who works here, and they, you know, our process validated everything. And so
that's beautiful.
And I feel, you know, and it's not about the money in terms of paying a recruiter as much as it is that if you have an A player, they're probably referring another A player, probably, you know?
Yeah.
And so, and our experience with recruiters is the same thing, that I think recruiters can be good. They're not the end all be all by any measure of the word. And a little bit depends on the job you're hiring for too, in terms of, you know, how technical is it, or how specific it is. That does make a difference.
Right. If it's a highly technical position, it's important to have a technical recruiter in that industry, and to follow your process.
Right. Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know Tyler, but, you know, I would say to, you know, what's the emotion with hiring a recruiter? Is it because I'm lazy and I'm in pain? And if you just want a quick fix, you're punting that pain down the road, and you're going to have more of a cost down the road. So, you know, just what's the motivation in hiring a recruiter?
I know sometimes I hear people won't hire recruiters because of the cost associated with that. I think it's a mistake too. I mean, it depends on where you are, you know, and what you're hiring for. So I don't know that there's I mean, I guess in my mind, the silver bullet answer is always, you know, have a process that's truly documented, written down, followed, vetted, the whole thing, and hit your natural network first, and then go to recruiters probably.
And if I can share some industry secrets, so there's contingency recruiters and retained recruiters, contingency search firms or retained search firms. So a contingency recruiter is going to work on a transaction basis. And a friend of mine, he uses technical recruiters, and he is only willing to pay them 20% transaction. He's like, I'm only going to pay 20%. So he knows that the recruiters he works with are going to shop the candidates around to other employers that are willing to pay a higher contingency fee. So, you know, recruiters don't always have a great name. And so the retained search firms, and you know, there's great ones out there. We do retained search at Vision Spark. They're there to work for you. So they essentially sign an agreement saying, I am not going to stop until I find someone that you're happy with. Right. And you are also committed to using us in our process.
Right. As a generalization, I think retained search firms, particularly the more important the job, it's a safer way to go. It's not about the transaction, it's about getting the right fit.
Yeah.
So.
I do have another one. Follow up from Tyler. How long should I expect the recruiting/hiring process to take?
So there's a lot of variables there. So, you know, if your budget's $20,000 and you're looking for someone with 30 years experience, it's going to take a long time. But if you have compensation that is on market, if it's for an A player, and your expectations of those qualifications are in line with compensation, 60 to 120 days. generally speaking. Super technical position, it could take longer depending on the applicant pool, so, someone that's, like in the engineering field or some of the other professionals, it could take some time.
Okay, so, all right. And Alec, do you have anything you want to close with at all?
There's a couple files that were sent that Annie sent over, and one's the hiring with confidence checklist. So if you have any questions on that, feel free to reach out. And then we also included a superstar score sheet. So this is it's really a thinking tool to I think it's the next one there, but it's a thinking tool to, if you're maybe up late one night, you're having trouble, thinking about the person on your team, are they in the right seat? Should you keep them on board? This is like a 2-minute exercise where you can, put the employee's name down and just go through that exercise, and it could help you objectively evaluate them. And it's a very small, and you could also use it with a candidate. So if you're getting ready to bring on a candidate and you need some help, and there's some fear and there's some trepidation of making that large expense, this can give you confidence.
Yeah, and by the way, I mentioned this to you, Alec, I love this tool. I think this is a great tool. I know we define B players a little differently. This is not, I like what you've done here, just for those people in the audience who've heard me talk about A and B, C players. My definition is a little different. I'm not saying it's better or worse. It's, B player is somebody who shares your values, but doesn't have enough context, and not old enough or been with you long enough to be an A player. This is different. This is a true grade of somebody, and I like this a lot. I really haven't seen a tool like this that really helps you grade a person. And I presume you can share this with the person too, right? To say, hey,
You can with an employee. I would be careful with a candidate though.
No, I mean employee.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah,
employee.
yeah.
When you're doing a review with employee, you can sit down, and it's funny or interesting, whatever. Several years ago, we kept talking about A, B, and C players, and everybody nodded their head. And then finally, a few years ago, we put in writing what an A player per role was, and what a B player and C player was. And I'll note we were at our annual retreat. We gave this out to everybody at the same time, and people are reading it. And one guy looks up and says, "Huh, I'm a B player." And I'm like, yeah, you are. And it was so helpful to get everybody on the same page, talking the same language.
Yeah.
Around, this is what success looks like per role.
Yeah.
And this is a step. I mean, it's not quite that specific, but it's pretty close. And I think it's important for companies, and particularly, for those, if you're $1 million, $2 million, $3 million business on the way to $10, $20 million, the sooner you adopt this type of perspective, this type of tool, the better you're going to be. You're going to get better at hiring and firing people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did this, I created this tool.
Right.
And I had one person on my team, this was a couple of years ago, and I'm like, man, there's something's not right. I took out this tool, I'm like, that's it. It helped me identify what my beef was.
Yeah. Well, okay. Anything else you want to add?
No, thank you. This is great.
Yep. I can't believe it. It's been an hour. And so thank you, Alec. It's been great. And every time I sit down with you, I get to learn something, and hopefully the audience was able to learn something as well too. And Andy, are we promoting another webinar, or is that another day?
Another day.
Okay, another day. Everybody have a good, reach out to us here through.
Thank you.
And is that it?
We're still live, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks for participating, and reach out to us with any questions, and have a good day.
Thank you. Take care.